Go. Hi, my name's Phil Hood. I'm the brand ambassador for Drum Magazine, and tonight I'm got a very special show here that I wanted to get involved in because it involves a friend of mine, Freddie Gruber, legendary drum teacher. Freddie's birthday is May 27th, and I have a guest tonight who is the foremost uh, exponent of Freddie's ideas and a great teacher in his own right. So really, he's part of the living tradition of the teaching of Freddie Gruber. For those who don't know anything at all about Freddie Gruber, and I hope that's not all of you, he really is a legendary teacher, but he's also a legendary character in drumming and in the drum industry. And Freddie's legendary as much for his personality, his heart, his character, his crazy character, as he is for his contributions to teaching many of the greatest drummers of all time, Peter Erskine, Neil Peart, Mitch Mitchell, and many others. But his story is interesting because Freddie sort of embodied a lot of things that happened in 20th century drumming. He grew up in New York. He became a great musician at a young age. In fact, in his early 20s, he was the drummer for clarinetist Buddy DeFranco. And downbeat said of him, his ability to play multiple rhythms, his constant playing behind the band, and what seemed like his impeccable taste in his choice of what to play mark him as a musician to watch closely. The New York Times wrote about Freddie's ability, particularly as a polyrhythmic percussionist. And yet, despite this, Freddie's career never went anywhere. He hung out and played with some of the greatest musicians of the greatest era in jazz, but his career was a big nothing, mainly because of heroin. And it's no surprise. In fact, that Buddy DeFranco band that he played in 1949, Frank DeVito was a later drummer in that band. He said when he joined, 11 of the 14 players in the band were junkies. Well, Freddie was a junkie, and he was a junkie along with Philly Joe Jones and other notable musicians of the day who were his friends and his hangs. And but Freddie didn't have a musical career to go along with it. He was too far into it, and he ended up in prison or in jail at Rikers, and only became a drum teacher when he later got to Los Angeles. And we're going to talk about this in a bit. He got to Los Angeles and hooked up with Terry Gibbs and Buddy Rich and Shelly Manne and other people who helped him get his life straight, get him involved in teaching. And although it wasn't a straight success story after that, over time, Freddie really honed his what he had to offer to drummers into something very special that touched a lot of people. So my guest is going to be Bruce Becker. A lot of you know Bruce from his videos, uh, from his work with Drumeo in recent years, and from the tremendous number of great drummers that Bruce has also worked with. So Bruce is going to be here to talk about his experiences with Freddie over 4 decades, and also to discuss what it is that he teaches today that comes straight from the living Freddie Gruber tradition. Bruce, welcome.
Thank you, Phil. Nice to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. People who got close to Freddie really loved him, even though he was one of the most cantankerous characters you'd ever meet. So celebrating his birthday seems like a great way to get into talking about what he taught.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's two camps. There's the ones who really adored Freddie and put up with his shenanigans, his personality quirks. And then there's a lot of people who just didn't like him, Mm-hmm. But I think Freddie's agenda was he didn't care whether you loved him or hated him. He wanted to know who he was. That's all. I mean, truly, towards the end especially. Yeah. I think those last 10 years of his life were really spent on just making sure that people knew the name Freddie Gruber, whatever the tab was,
Sort of burnishing the story.
Yeah, because I talk to a lot of people and they go, man, there's like no real information on Freddie. You know, there's not a lot that he left behind in terms of that, other than, you know, the stuff that fills the air and the ethers of people talking about him, but not a lot of documented stuff, whether it's playing, even teaching. You know, when you would see like a drum channel interview or whatever, it was rather vague and somewhat, you know, just not real clear. The metaphors were there. And even some of the metaphors were kind of sticky as to like, what the heck is this guy talking about? But those who knew him would kind of get it. And even those guys who did know him, you still had to kind of dig deep to get down to the bottom of what it was. And even when I lived with Freddie, because I hung a lot with him, you know, I could get him to be somewhat clear, but I'd have to really hammer on him to get a nugget where I went, okay, finally, why didn't you just say that like, you know, like 22 hours ago? Isn't just, I looked at him like this guy who had just such a presence. And that's what I think he really had, that you know, not necessarily, you know, the teaching, of course, but there was a sense of presence. You know, when he walked into a room,
yeah,
it's like you could feel his vibe in the room immediately. There was no bones about it. He had that air of ambiance that, you know, you just, wow, who is this guy? You know, and he could be kind and talk to anybody on any level, but he could also be very just rude and cantankerous and just, you know what the word is, an a-hole. You know, I mean, just flat out.
What, you know, what you're saying is that it's hard to separate this cantankerous character, this junkie, this jazzer from a very young age, with what he was as a teacher. They're not, you know, it wasn't something, teaching wasn't something he did. Teaching became who he was.
No, exactly.
Thinking about music was who he was.
Yeah, yeah. And he even said, I didn't want to teach. I just fell into it. You know, that was his line. And he told me something about Charley Perry, and I don't really know Charley Perry. I mean, I know the name, but I think it was Charley Perry's the name that I recall pretty vividly. And he would say, Charley Perry told me, man, you got to have a concept to teach, man, a concept. You got to, like a program, which is, you know, honestly, in those days when I started with him, which would have gone back to 1978, he did have a lot of detail and a lot of guts to what he did. I have my Buddy Rich book here that I'll just open up and I'll just show. Here's like one page, and there's just scribblings all over it, you know, and that's one page of many. You know, everything was kind of torn up, but it was on you to recall what you were doing. He didn't have a notepad or a notebook and write Buddy Rich page 38, you know, A, B, C, D, or any of that stuff. It was on you to recall. And I had, I don't say like a photographic memory, but a very vivid recall to certain things. And so I was able to compartmentalize that stuff and keep it very well categorized, like in a filing cabinet in my head for years and years and years. And so my period of studying with Freddie would have been from roughly the end of 77 to the middle of 84. And I know it was the middle of 84 because I remember I went to Europe for a tour with my brother. It was the first time I really went on the road. Well, not the first time, but the first time with an original project. And, you know, those years were really just emboldened in my head. I was used in his example and many times. Sometimes I get there early and I'd sit on the floor and watch him teach because he'd go, Bruce, come on in here and sit on the floor, you know. And then later on, when I came back after that tour in Europe and spent a little time on the East Coast and touring, my brother and I had really kind of solidified this thing where we're going to get a record deal, which we eventually did with MCA. But I started to always go back to Freddie and talk to him, because I had such a respect for him. And I wanted to keep in touch with him because I also felt like, geez, I want to get even more, you know. But rather than going and study with him, I just became more of like the go-to guy, like the guy who'd run to Gelson's for him, take him to the airport, house sit. And it was really spawned off like the day Buddy Rich died. I remember it vividly because I called him up. I was like, oh my God, Buddy died. That's terrible, you know, because at that point, Freddie had made, you know, a good inroad to really hanging with Buddy on a pretty regular basis. And I felt this like responsibility to like help Freddie through that time. And I think that the death of Buddy really alarmed Freddie, and I think it kind of set him into a junk mode again. I know a sax player that worked with Louis Bellson and was a guy around town who probably subbed on the Tonight Show and other things. I don't know Larry Cavelli's full career, but I remember going and seeing two guys sitting on the couch, like nodding out, and Freddie, just gibbering. And so at that point, I was like really the first call guy. Like I would call him up on a given day and go, "What are you doing?" He'd go, "I'm working, come on over," and then it would be like, go to Mort's and get me the whatever, and the Bee's Bakery, I need the Kaiser rolls without the poppy seed, without the poppy seeds, with the sesame seeds, but don't get too many on them, and don't talk to that one girl because she always gives me the crappy rolls. Give me, all these. He had such rigid rules, man. Yeah. I mean, like the first time I went to him, I'll just tell you, there was like a ritual. Go to Save On Drugstore and get him 2 packs of Marlboro Light 100s. And then he'd give, like the $3.50 or whatever and go, "It's going to be, $3.33. Bring me back the change." And he wanted to see if you could do that task,
He required support to get through life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he got it oftentimes through friends.
Yeah, and he had a lot of people that he depended
on. Whether it was students,
friends
like you, whether it was Buddy Rich or Terry Gibbs at an earlier age. I mean, he came out.
Sure.
He came out west. Shelley Mann was his big help. Got him a gig at the Beverly Wilshire. But Freddie hated the straight gigs. Now, one thing, his first gig as a drummer, really a real gig, was with Rudy Valley.
Right. and not the kind of gig that you'd expect Freddie to be on. I'm sure that he was trying to buck the system right away.
Yeah, that was as far from being outside as you could be. So,
well, it seems like he purposely got in his own way to get out of certain things, like in terms of those kinds of things, gigs, because I don't think he was able to really meld and mesh with that kind of stuff because of his peculiar personality and his quirkiness. He probably just didn't get along with people so well, so easily, because he was a, say what you play what you say kind of guy and get in your face about it.
And if he was a kid today, the school psychologist would be analyzing him.
And, he could have been like, I don't know, like, ADHD, high functioning autistic, who knows, man,
Right. He couldn't get along. He had a chance to play with Charlie Parker a little. Couldn't he? They're Tal Farlow. They were gig after gig. Lee Konitz, Alan Iger, all kinds of incredible musicians that he played once or twice with, but couldn't.
Shot himself in the foot.
Yes. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
And so they're
self-saboteur.
I forget who it was, Zoot Sims or somebody once said to him, "Man, don't do that. It's going to hurt your career." And Freddie was like, "Career?"
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Freddie was just kind of a ball of energy moving through the world. Right. But you got to feel that sort of OCD personality of his had a lot to do with it. So we got this guy. He screws up in New York. He blows all his career chances. He comes out west. He plays like a year and a half in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
He gets to L.A. He starts working the after hour. He's working at the Beverly Wilshire, but after hours he's playing with really cool people: Hampton Hawes, Dexter Gordon, Elmo Hope. He's going to the jams. He's teaching maybe a little bit.
He was using Charlie Hayden. He used to tell me he had Charlie Hayden as a bass player on the bandstand with him.
That's right. He's got. He knows this young guy named Don Lombardi. He kept using off and on, but he got involved with Terry Gibbs.
Yeah.
Who had a music store and really.
That was around 1967. Yeah.
Okay.
With Mel Zelnick too. Mel Zelnick was the co-owner.
Yeah. And he always talked about what a good time of his life occurred after that. That he got physically healthy, got off the junk.
Yeah.
Buddy was becoming a better friend.
Yeah.
He knew all the guys, Irv Kotler, who was Sinatra's drummer, and the people on the West Coast, Keltner. That to me, that's sort of like the sort of phases of his teaching career.
Yeah, that music stop I think was a really fertile ground for him. Now I knew Mel Zelnick very well because I later went to teach at the music stop, which was ironic because I didn't
Hmm.
know that Freddie had such deep roots there, starting there. And I guess like some of the early guys might have been, I think Mike Barrett. I talked to Mike recently, and I'm pretty certain that Mike started there at the music stop with Freddie before when Freddie went on his own to follow Freddie to wherever he was. Same with Don Lombardi.
Hmm.
Um, the thing that I remember about Mel was that Freddie was just, a player, like he'd be all over the student's mom, like he'd be like, kid, go in there and play that exercise again. Or he might even have a student
Yeah.
go in there and run it, and he'd be collecting tabs. So he was always running a game on that stuff until such time that I guess he could break away from the confines of the music stop to do his own thing. And I know that he had a girlfriend at that time, Tilly, and I remember that he was teaching there. I wasn't a student there, but I had heard about that he was living with Tilly and she was looking after him. And, he was teaching at that house at the time. And then he probably pulled some shenanigans on Tilly. But I remember later on meeting Tilly when he was at the Etowanda house.
Hmm.
And she just seemed like a motherly lady who really wanted to look after Freddie. But Freddie, you could look after him, but he was also going to just punch up all the time. You weren't going to get like a cooperative Freddie,
Right.
It seemed that he just couldn't be like a compassionate, like good guy and take the good graces of somebody's, givings. He had to somehow crush it into another zone. And just, again, like the shooting himself in the foot again, with
Yeah.
good people. And kind of stomping on those relationships. He did it with me time after time. I was fairly loyal, and I was loyal for about, a good 23 years. And then it kind of he broke the camel's back, and I couldn't hang. And I kind of got so mad at him that he was really pissed at me because of that, because he knew how much I knew about him.
Yeah.
And so I'd make my pilgrimage over there. Once or twice a year, I would call. I had to write a script because he had a way of descrambling your brain.
Yes.
Especially when he was mad at me. And he'd play games, I'd call him up. I'd go, Freddie, how you doing? He'd go, hello? Freddie, who is this? Now, Freddie had an impeccable ear because there was a couple of times where I called where there was some real, like, heavy stuff going on. Where I wasn't on the inside circle with him. But as soon as I called, he could tell the voice. He knew it was me. There was a former drummer / keyboard player vibist by the name of Roger Byrne, who I'd met. Roger was a student of Freddie's probably around 1981. And I later played with Roger. And he had gotten cancer. And it was like at the end, and another drummer friend that I'd met through Freddie as well didn't want to call Freddie. And I remember I said, do you want me to call Freddie? He's like, oh, that would be great. Because I wanted to tell Freddie that Roger was on his last legs. He was in hospice care, like somewhere in San Diego. And it was like Freddie had a good radar for stuff, And so I think, you could kind of recognize the total quality of your voice. Like he had really great ears. I remember listening to stuff with him.
Absolutely.
And I was listening to this Street of Dreams record from Lyle Mays. And there was one track that Steve Gadd's on. And we were listening to it, and Freddie just went, whoa, what a feel. Who the fuck is that, man? And I went, oh, that's Steve Gadd. Uh-huh. And there are other points where he had like this dialed in like sensibility, that he could tap into. It wasn't all the time, but there were times where I was like blown away with the depth of his perceptions, where you go, wow, and he really had that. But again, I just think, because of his moodiness, he couldn't tap into it all
I
the
would
time.
ask him about all of those long gone musicians that he knew in the late 40s, early 50s, the saxophonists and the bass players. And he frequently had really good observations about what made them a great player.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, he was very colorful.
So you know what's funny about this is, basically, for people listening, or for you and me, you get up in the morning and you've got some kind of a goal or something, or you have one in your life, or
Yeah,
in your
yeah,
personal life, or in your work
yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah.
Freddie wasn't like that. When I
No,
when
no,
I
no,
would
no.
go visit Freddie, I would do the things that you did. I would go over there 3 or 4 in the afternoon on a business trip to
Right.
LA. And we would talk about music for a couple of hours, and then he would talk politics for an hour. And then you would watch him make a cup of coffee, which could take an hour because he was so OCD. And then go into the grocery store would take an hour. And he would get his food to eat at 10 o'clock at night, and the other food that he would eat at 4 in the morning. So
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
keeping normal hours, having a career, having a goal, getting along with his significant other, that wasn't part of his game plan. And when it
No.
came to be 10 o'clock at night, and I would say, Freddie, I'm really going to miss my plane if I don't get to the airport and get home. And he said, oh yeah, I forgot. You got a wife, you got kids, straight life. And he would say it
Right.
like with a little vinegar.
Right, right, right. Just kind of sticking it to you a little bit. But
Yeah.
or what he would do with me, where it wasn't a pressing issue of leaving, but I'd go, Freddie, I gotta go, man. He'd go, Bruce, wait a minute, let me ask you something. And he would somehow sucker punch you into another hour's worth of conversation. Sure. Now I'd look at my watch and I go, Jesus, it's 4 now, 4 in the morning. I'm not going to get anything productive going on this next day. And I remember driving home on the Ventura Freeway, heading west to Woodland Hills from Encino, going, God damn it, man. Another night, on the other end, I'd go, well, that was a great hang, because Freddie would get pretty animated about certain topics when I was trying to tap into information. Yeah. Or he loved to pick my brain about politics. I was really into Pacifica Radio, KPFK here in Los Angeles. Or I was really into just, getting back into the technical thing and asking him pointed questions, because at that point
you'd never get the answer, because the conversation to him was not badminton, it was like pinball.
No. Exactly. But he loved it. He loved it. He would sucker punch you into another hour, an hour and a half, and you'd go, oh man, I gotta get out of here.
And he would just to keep the thing going. He loved that.
He didn't want you to leave because he didn't want to be alone.
Let me ask you about this, and then I want to jump into what it is Freddie taught. Because a lot of
Sure.
when I meet young guys, they say, "What about this Freddie Gruber guy? I heard about this guy." Right. But like you say, there's not much out there on YouTube that is actually useful. And Freddie was cryptic anyway. So right. Even when he's explaining stick control, a lot of people are going, "What the hell's this?"
Right.
So first thing though, everybody who studied with it talks about showing up for a lesson and finding out that there's 4 other guys ahead of you who had an even earlier lesson.
Yeah.
So your 4 o'clock lesson is going to happen at 9:30 at night.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I hear that from Schulman and Glass and everybody who ever. What was that like?
Well, the first couple of years I studied with him, I was also a college student at Cal State, not Cal State, no, it was Pierce College, community college. And so I was kind of an early morning guy. I used to like to get that stuff done so I could practice all afternoon. And so my lesson was usually Monday at noon. Uh-huh. And I'd get there and he'd be sometimes just rolling in, or maybe he'd be 15 or 20 minutes rolling in, and he probably would have been maybe up in Santa Barbara for the weekend. You got to think back to that. He was rolling in a lot of students and it was all cash.
Yeah.
So I think he just went and did what he wanted to do on the weekend and come back. And he was very mysterious. I never really knew where he went. But at those times, pretty on time. But later on, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, I'd get there for a 4 in the afternoon lesson, get home. And I had this really, to put it mildly, not a girlfriend that was on board with the whole idea.
Yeah.
And she'd actually call over to Freddie's, that's pre-cell phone. She'd call his line and Freddie would go, "It's for you." And she'd be like, "Your lesson was at, 4 o'clock. You tell that Freddie Gruber, or when I go to the lesson, she'd say, "You tell that Freddie Gruber, your lesson's at 7, because the 7 o'clock lesson, you came home at midnight, But, it was the hang. I met Bruce Gary there. Burley Drummond. There was a great drummer that I was really, really fond of who had played with Harvey Mandel by the name of Paul Lagos, who I think was from the Minneapolis area. And there was one or two records that a friend of mine had just sort of made a compilation tape of Paul's playing. And when I met him, to me, it was like, oh my God, you're on that record. You know, I was like 19 or whatever. And I thought, this guy's incredible. But I got to meet him. I met John Hernandez there. He was at my first lesson. John Hernandez, if nobody knows, was the longtime drummer with Danny Elfman and Oingo Boingo.
Yeah.
Great drummer. Also played several years with Helen Reddy.
Yeah.
Great drummer. Who else would I have met there? Oh, a great Venezuelan percussionist, Rudy Regalado, who played drum set with El Chicano in like the mid-'70s. Yeah. I met Rudy all the time. Now, Rudy, being a South American guy, I think the powder was flying around, and Freddie was not one to shy away from that. I'm sure Rudy would go, hey, Freddie, you know, or if somebody had a joint. But as far as like the scheduling, it didn't bother me because, again, I looked at Freddie as like, that's Freddie. You know, like a lot of people, they endured. A lot of people didn't have the patience. Like one of my current students, Tris and Bowden. I met Tris at the later house of Freddie's on the Zelza in Encino. And Tris just couldn't hang because he didn't get Freddie cryptically, and he couldn't hang because he had a schedule to keep. He was playing with Chicago. There was no dicking around. Everything was scheduled. So, you know, for him, it was very difficult. But for me, I found it charming. And when I didn't study with him, I found it even more humorous because I'd be laughing at all these guys sitting on there going like, geez, I had my 7 o'clock lesson and I got to go to thing. I said, well, dude, that's how it is. You know, you want to hang. This is what Freddie puts you through.
So let's talk about the teaching. I have this notion that there's sort of early Freddie teaching, which might be more traditional, technique oriented, and then this later Freddie teaching, which is a little more Yoda like, and but still comes out of all his experience with the history of American music.
Oh yeah.
But you know, where he explicitly is trying to get in the head of his students and work on their body mechanics and ergonomics and a way of thinking.
Right. The early teaching. So I had, you know, I think I had a really good period when I studied because looking back and knowing Freddie and even talking to him, the period that I came upon him would would think would have been the height of his clarity in teaching.
That's a strong statement, at the peak of his powers. And what was he really giving people in technique
when I started with him, he had a really comprehensive way of breaking down the hands. There was a lot of redundancy and there was a lot of stuff, and he threw stuff at you. And I think it was for also to see, like, can you hang? Can you hang? You want to hang? He'd always tell me later on, I took an insurance policy out on you, man. You know, and honestly did. So those first like year and a half were like the Buddy Rich book, and then, you know, stuff. And it wasn't like for rote. It was his embellishments. Just what I would do. That's just using literature. In some ways, I humbly stay with certain things because it was passed on to me, but it's not what the book was really dictating. It's just like a literature thing. And I just go, well, this is easy. Get that book. And I could work out of certain sections and kind of assist you. Yeah. And the Burns and Mallon book, the Developing Finger Control. Right. And honestly, they were ripped to shreds. I went through every little detail of that. And then later on, it became more conceptual, but still with books. So Vinny was hot. So Chafee books became part of the vernacular.
Right.
Ralph Humphrey was hot, you know, from Zappa, but
Yeah.
Freddie got to know him, so Freddie kind of pushed that even in the odds book. That was actually a little bit later,
Uh-huh.
but for sure that for the Chafee, I had two of the volumes. I had this Sticking Patterns book and the oh shit, I think Time and Meter or Meter and
So
Time.
this is interesting. So he was really uh, keeping attuned to what the the drummers on the cutting edge were doing.
Absolutely, Freddie had. I think he stayed really with his ear to the pavement
Yeah.
for those years. What I was going to say though, going on about Freddie with the books and the shift and the change in the early '80s,
Yeah.
I think he had his ear to the grind, to the floor. You know, he really listened. Different drummers coming in. You know, John Guerin. I saw John play about
He
six
loved
different
John
times.
Guerin.
And I would talk to John and I'd say, John, when did you study with Freddie? He goes, Freddie always says that. I never studied with Freddie. And Freddie always adopted John and said he was one of his original students.
Yeah.
My idea with Freddie is sometimes if you walk through his door, you became automatically a student by just the mere fact that you were in his presence, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because there were other guys that he claimed to have taught, and I wasn't sure about that. You know, like on Wikipedia, it says Vinnie Colaiuta. I don't know if Vinnie really studied. I think he hung with Freddie, and Freddie would certainly, you know, you got a drummer in the room. Freddie's going to talk shop no matter what. And especially when he had that kind of ear,
Yeah.
he was going to get deep and tap into where that guy was coming from.
Well, that seemed to be one of his real talents as a teacher.
Yeah.
Was
Oh, yeah.
That's what Erskine talked about, that Freddie saw where a person had come from, what concepts they had picked up, what concepts they had gotten wrong, and what they were trying to do. He tapped into that really fast.
Yeah, man. He passed that one along to me really well. But there's other circumstances that kind of opened me up to sort of accept and see how that worked. Just different set of circumstances in my life that came forward that allowed me to understand that dynamic. Because a lot of guys would more, and I started like this too, regurgitating what you saw. But it was more than regurgitating. And Freddie would always say, like, this guy wants me to write a book. I can't write a book. You know, what am I going to do? You know, because I don't think he ever wanted to get one snapshot of him at one particular moment in time, because it would give too much definition if he had done something like that. I actually, you know, I reached out to a former student of Freddies who he brought up also on my first couple of lessons, this guy, Joey Herrick, who now is in the pet food industry. Joey worked with John Davidson back in the day. And I remember Freddie talking to me like, my student Joey, when he told me when he was 21, he was going to buy himself a brand new Cadillac. On his 21st birthday, rolled up in a brand new Coupe de Ville, man. He works with John Davidson. He gets paid $2,000 a week, whether he's working or not. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. But Freddie would really, like, you know, take the successes of his students and really, you know, marvel in it and really, you know, be proud of that.
Sure. Because...
So I looked up Joey because John Riley sent me an email and said, I saw that Joey Herrick wrote a book of transcriptions and it said it was edited by Freddie. So my first thought after reading the email from John Riley is, well, I'm going to look up Joey, which I did, and I got in contact with him. But my first response was, no way in hell did Freddie edit any book. There's no way. And so when I talked to Joe, he said, I did that as a nod to Freddie. And then I gave him a big thank you in the forward as well. Yeah. He goes, he didn't have anything. It was just transcriptions I did. Yeah. And I just wanted to sort of, you know, give a nod to Freddie. So that was an interesting story. But Joey's not in the drum industry anymore. He's in the pet food industry.
So what about this thing, this sort of, I guess you would say it's Freddie's concept in a way, that he really got inside the head of students like Weckl or Erskine. Mm-hmm. And what he taught them was dancing.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term. That he taught this idea that it's not all about the struggle, this physical struggle of being on the throne. It's about dancing on top of that throne.
Yeah.
And that he wanted you to have a movement like a dancer. And this really connects to the fact that he he connected to the whole history of jazz, back to an era when jazz was closely associated with dancing on a
Absolutely.
Saturday night, or dancing
Right.
in the movies, or tap dancing.
Or tap dancing, which would have been, basically the drum set version of what they were playing with early swing music. It
Yeah.
was that thing. That was what it was.
And that the
So,
key to swinging was to being loose like a dancer, and sort of changing your orientation to the drum. So you're not hitting this thing hard. You're sort of dancing on the surface of it.
yeah, I mean, he had a very, and I mean, some of the roots of that would be, via what Morello would have garnered from Stone, or what Jimmy Chapin sort of preached a little bit. But Freddie had a really interesting way of doing choreography of certain things and really adhering to that. Now, in terms of what Dave Weckl did, exactly, because I wasn't there, but I was at one of Dave's first or second lessons where Freddie badgered me to come over and play for him, which actually was a huge light bulb moment for me. Because up to that point, because I started so young with him, I didn't see the commodity of the looseness. And what I would express about that is what he gave to me was a flexible technical approach that fundamentally was built on the looseness. You can always add the tension after the fact, which allowed me to get a more accurate idea of different dialects of music. And so as a result of that, when he badgered me to come and play for Dave, and I was living in Europe at the time, and when I came in, I think I was jet lagging the first or second day. And he was like, Bruce, I want you to come over. I got somebody here I want you to play for it. So he didn't give the name. And I went, nah, Freddie, I'm tired. I'm jet lagging. Let's, I'll talk to you tomorrow. He's like, no. Come on over. I'm like, Freddie, I'm tired. No, Bruce, I want you to come over. David's here. I want you to play for him. So David's here.
So you're over to play for Dave Weckl.
Well, who the heck is David? So that's what I said. Who the hell is David? And Freddie Riley over the phone, Weckl, who do you think? Well, how the hell do I know? So then I'm really like mortified. I'm going, no. So I go and get in my car after a bunch of badgering from Freddie, kind of just bitching at myself, going, what the hell am I going to play for this guy? He's seen everybody under the moon, So I get in, I sit down, and I just do my loose, medium swing thing and a little bit of a polyrhythmic thing and into a 6/8 thing and, flow. And I stop playing, and Weckl goes, hey, man, that's great. Wow, you playing any, and I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, wow, okay. So, and it didn't knock me in the head right at that moment. It was like not even like a month later. It took like a little time to really process and go, oh, that's a commodity that guys like this truly want.
Yeah. Now, let me stop you here. So something you said was really interesting, that being able to play loose in sort of a Freddie style made it easier for you to play different dialects of music, which in a way is the whole ball of wax, because it's an instrument that adapts itself to any kind of music. And you don't want to be the guy who doesn't know how to swing when Lady Gaga decides she's doing swing instead of ballads.
Right.
So, but it's also saying that if you're just good at one style, you've sort of mastered your tension in that style.
Well, yeah, to a degree. So how I see it is that he brought forward, for me, because I studied well beyond any other guy, and we went into concepts that I've never seen anybody else go into. And I saw lots of students, like, I don't know if it's hundreds, but probably hundreds. Mm-hmm. I saw a young Joey Warnaker when he was 16, Lenny Warnaker's son, who went on to play with Beck and had a little bit of a standing in REM for a minute and loads of sessions. Great drummer. And so what I'm saying is, like, what I did was it opened me up to be extraordinarily loose. Now, the problem that I had to overcome was, as a result of being loose, I took that too literal. And certain dialects, whether it's Latin music or certain kinds of big band, there would be a little bit of a rigidity that you want to add into it to make that band swing and push them forward. If you're too loosey-goosey on a big band, those horn players are going to lasso you by the neck and pull you 3 bars behind. And the last thing you want to be doing is dragging. You want to drive it.
Yeah.
So you got to stand on it a bit. With the Latin thing, it's all about really being on top of it. And so later on, as I went and studied Latin percussion with a great guy here, Jerry Steinholtz, it opened my head and I started thinking more about that. And different periods of my development of my career sort of woke me up to, oh, geez, I can't get away with it like this, even though I was kind of set up like that. But if I do this, it really doesn't bother going back to the looseness. So I don't want to get so vague with the this and the this. But if I'm doing a 16th note thing and it's just kind of loosey-goosey and kind of bubbly, but it doesn't like adhere to something like James Gadsden or Al Jackson Jr., then I got to kind of add a little rigidity to get that sound out. And my hand's already constructed for that. But I don't get tight or rigid and get locked into that box. I can go back and go and jump to another springboard off to something different. And so that's kind of how I color it.
And you're using examples of music where you really want to get up on top of the beat.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, like, so with my teaching, again, getting into like the technical aspects, I don't want to just sit around and go, all right, here's the technical thing and blah, blah, blah. I always try to pigeon it and bring it forward right into a musical example. This is why I get, you know, some high level guys. And that's all I got to honor Freddie for, kind of nursing my head and nurturing my head to a great degree and being able to be around that. But with, like I said, the circumstances that I had as a kid, I was already technically inclined, not drumistically, but whether it was skiing or baseball, my head was so locked into form. And so when I met Freddie at 19, I went, oh, yeah, this guy, get this guy program. So Freddie's thing of like talking to a Dave Weckl in a philosophical way. But, you know, he broke things down for Dave, too. It wasn't like he just did that. There was a tool belt that Freddie brought to the table that he could offer. Now, how deep he went, I don't know. And how deep he went with other guys. Now, Ian Wallace, I know, because I used to go and hang with Ian all the time. I was actually pretty good friends with Ian. So I saw him how he taught with Ian. I saw him how he taught with other guys. I was at a couple of Steve Smith lessons. And there he was a little bit more of the comprehensive breakdown stuff. Yeah, you know, so.
You know what I liked was when he would, we would see somebody or just catch a little music of somebody at like a show, a PASIC show or a NAMM event or something. And he'd really, certain drummers would really excite him. And he'd want to explain to you a little bit about why they were so good. And then he would say this thing to me. Like one night we were at some event and Purdy was playing. And Freddie had this expression. He'd say, now, you know, Purdy's the real deal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And Sheila E., he says, you know, in that family, Sheila's the real deal.
Oh, yeah. No, there were certain guys like John Guerin. He would say the same thing. He'd go, Johnny Guerin, the real deal, man. Why do you think they had to play on the soundtrack for Bird, huh?
Yeah.
Because he knows how to play to a click track, but he's the real deal, Bruce.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. Well, Freddie was the real deal, man. We should just leave it there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Probably cool people to speak with.
Okay. I know that there's a lot of drummers out there that heard a little bit about Freddie Gruber. They saw something on YouTube and they thought it was bullshit. They can study with Bruce. So just direct some people to where they can learn your techniques, because you are the living tradition as far as this teaching lineage goes.
Yeah, I just go to my website, brucebecker.com. There's a form there if you're interested. It's gotten quite busy, but please still send something out. I'll see if I can fit you in. If you're really serious about changing your game and you want to make, you know, like the path of least resistance become your reality, that's what I do. And I always put it forward into a musical context. And again, been very blessed to have, you know, guys like Daniel Glass, Mark Schulman. I taught an early Glenn Sobel, Tristan Bowden, Jiro Yamaguchi from Ozo Motley. I was actually invited to go see Little Feat tonight. Gabe Ford is a student of mine.
Yeah.
But in my world, because at 60, and this is all for you younger guys, maybe wait, but I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. So getting out for me is not like what it used to be. But I did all that stuff at the early age. But anyway, you want to get with me, brucebecker.com. I have some videos on YouTube. You can get a taste. You can look at some of the Drumeo material. There's a long form on YouTube from Drumeo called The Truth About Hand Technique. And that came out in 2016. And I think that describes very well about where I'm coming from as an educator.
Good. There you have it. I want to thank Michael Valsbein of Drummer Nation, who's going to help distribute this show. He's a great guy to work with. And thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Phil. I really appreciate it, and great to hang and to sort of celebrate the life of Freddie.
All right. See you in person next time.
All right, man. Cheers.
All right.